What is up everyone, it's Saber here and welcome to another Naruto What If you end up liking the video, please consider subscribing. It's free and you can take it back at any time and it really helps me out, and this is my main channel, so if you're interested in what if Naruto was raised by the Joker or what if Naruto had a shape-shifting bloodline and was insane, go check out my main channel. And if you're interested in what if Naruto was taken over by the Kyuubi when he was born, or what if Naruto was trained by Itachi after leaving Jiraiya, go check out my second channel. And with all of the YouTube formalities out of the way, let's get into it. Gaara scowled as he stared out the window into the open night, his features contorted by a sudden madness that took possession. The air smelled different here, a vast and striking contrast from the dry sandy atmosphere of Suna where he hailed. Kanagakure's smelt of leaves and forests, soothing, calming, alluring, a feeling that clashed powerfully with his bloodthirsty nature. It felt wrong, threatening, constricting, as though every fiber of his cursed existence fought against the strange aura, soothing and violate, exotic and nauseating at the same time. Without warning, sand streaked forth from his gourd and enveloped the feathered body of an unsuspecting pigeon. Seconds later, all that was left of the wretched creature was but trickles of blood mingling with the shifting sands. Through it all, Gaara smiled, a smile marked by lunacy and insanity. How sweet the blood smells inside his mind, Gaara howled in euphoria. Blood, I want blood. And beside his ears came again the soothing whisperings of his mother, dark and smoky, full of promises of fire and slaughter, speaking softly of fell deeds in the shadows. Gaara listened with rapt attention, hanging upon every word as he stared out to the village of the leaf stretching endlessly before him. Slowly the smile on his face widened, twisting his visage until he resembled the devil himself. Soon the village of Konoha will burn to the ground, and the blood of its denizens shall become the feast that will sate his ire. Soon at the thought his mind turned back to encounter hours earlier, and the face of a pale-skinned raven-haired youth surfaced from the sea of memories, the one who had struck Kankuro with the pebble. He had unknowingly or not incurred Gaara's interest, and very few individuals ever managed to survive after such a feat. If the village of the leaf shall fall, then your blood shall be the first to spill unto the stones. His mutter fell silent to the wind. Uchiha Sasuke, behind the sand wielder, the pair of Suna siblings exchanged nervous glances. They had stood a few feet away from the young Jinchuriki in case of a sudden and unprovoked attack. One can never be too sure with Gaara, and yet they still heard the ominous words uttered by the demon carrier, sending shivers down their spines. Kankuro, dressed in his usual black attire, was about to speak before Tamari silenced the puppet user with a wilting look and gestured towards the door. Kankuro nodded and moved towards the exit, not wanting to incur the wrath of his already murderous brother. The last time Gaara had acted like this, it took weeks to scrub off the blood, and Kankuro certainly did not want to be the donor of that blood. Thank you very much. At last the two managed to make it to the hallway of the hotel undetected. Gaara, still caught up in his mad planning, perhaps where they shared a breath of relief. It wasn't that they disliked their brother much, but the looming presence of the sand user can unnerve even the bravest of men. Few. Kankuro sighed, wiping imaginary sweat from his painted face with exaggerated relief. I thought I was a goner back there. What do you figure is eating him up anyway, sis? Besides the Shikaku, you mean the blonde fan mistress retorted snappishly, obviously in a rather foul mood. Tamari, to Kankuro's knowledge, held just a touch more compassion for their darling brother than he could find to spare, and at such times when Gaara seemed more demon than human, it upset Tamari immensely, knowing that she could have done nothing to aid Gaara through those dark trials. As for Kankuro, he kept his distance. It was not that he did not care, he did care in his own way for his brother's safety, just not as involved as Tamari. He figured this way, his life is in less imminent danger, Gaara being already angry with him as it is well. Yeah, Kankuro shrugged. After a long and uncomfortable silence stretched on between them, and the two of them reached the lobby of the hotel where the attendants greeted their presence. He seemed pretty fixated on that Uchiha kid from the look of things. Tamari nodded at Kankuro's observation. Gaara seemed to have taken a special interest in the raven-haired teen, not a good sign. The last time Gaara had taken this much interest in someone to the point of monologue, all they could find of the poor bastard was his pinky. Judging by the shudder that overtook her brother, the fan user knew the teen had been thinking along the same line. No matter how good the kid may be, once Gaara had his eyes on him, he's as good as gone, while causing the death of the last, well, next to last really, but who's counting? Uchiha may cause reasonable panic and alarm within the village, but Tamari is not about to impose on Gaara what he can and cannot do, especially when his killing lust is already rolling off the boy in waves. A ninja she may be, but Tamari still held her life as an object of reasonable value. With another dejected sigh, she parted from Kankuro and walked out into the chilly Konoha night, hoping to grab a quick bite to eat and take her mind of the complexity that has become of her life, and don't even get her started on the Sansom alliance. As far as she was concerned, dealing with someone like Orochimaru is just plain asking for trouble. If the snake was willing to betray his own village, what is to guarantee that he would not pull the same stunt twice? And on the subject of Kanai-Bakura, for all she had heard of village, Temari did not think too highly of it. Certainly its shinobis were some of the best in the world, but Temari doubted that even they could have helped with Gaara's problem. After all, what mortal can possibly defeat a Biju sealed? Or not a few miles away, Naruto sneezed loudly, startling Haku, who sat next to him. The two of them had, since Sabuza in his drunken state had destroyed the kitchen appliances while preaching in a slur about the danger that his toaster ovens ate out almost every night, at least until the maintenance crew can fix the thoroughly destroyed area. As it so happens, while leafing through the phone book regarding a new restaurant, Haku had came across the tiny ramen stand ran by a kindly old man and his teenage daughter, who, much to Haku's annoyance, often stole furtive and blushing glances towards Naruto during the course of the meal. Supposedly, in spite of its size, the stand is rather popular to a great number of Konoha nins, even those of legendary status such as the Akimikis Hataki Kakashi, and even the Hokage himself had occasionally dined in the humble eatery. After one meal, Haku could see why it wasn't simply the fact that the food was good that had attracted so many souls, but rather the atmosphere which surrounded the shop. Unlike the more expensive and fancy restaurants where resided an air of seriousness and formality, the ramen stand is a place of relaxation where a shinobi can thoroughly enjoy him or herself without remaining conscious to his surroundings. It is a place where one can simply sit around and enjoy one, or as the younger children referred to it, chill. And as Haku could tell you, for a shinobi whose life revolved around harrowing ventures and death encounters, such a little spot of comfort was a godsend, especially after 3 months of grueling Chunin missions. Even Naruto, whose face is as unreadable as ever, seemed visibly lax as he attacked the noodles with surprising speed. What Haku wouldn't have given for this moment to last forever. Unbeknownst to the Ice Maiden inside the stand, a certain Ayam thought in the same parallel, although for her she could have done without Haku, who had subtly sabotaged so many of her conversation attempts with the blonde Apollo. Unfortunately for the two females, their short moment of bliss was interrupted as another customer planted herself onto one of the empty stools. With a half-hearted greeting, Ayam proceeded to take the orders, although even in her distraction she noticed that the girl no older than her spoke with a distinct foreign accent. Now that she thinks back on it, she did witness a number of foreigners inside the village of late. Most of them seemed to have arrived recently. She had not given it too much thought at the time, of course, but now a bowl of miso ramen, please. Temari stifled a yawn as she placed her order. She had heard of this place from one of the locals when she asked for the nearest restaurant, and apparently the man had thought rather highly of the place, and after a sniff of the aroma that wafted from the kitchen, Temari had to admit that the man had spoken the truth. It was not until the bowl was brought to her that Temari gained an awareness of her surrounding and noticed the two others that sat next to her, one of them a girl a few years her junior, but with a face that Temari could not but help envy. A little confident as she is in her own appearance, the girl is in every sense of the word a goddess to be with, a face that would entice every man between 8 and 80. Hell, even that serving girl is quite attractive, if she understood how the male mind works. While possessing none of the feral beauty of herself or the delicate elegance of the strange porcelain girl, the waitress had a simple homespun allure, or what her brother might cheerfully refer to as the girl next door. Damn, is Konoha even plentiful in beauty as it is in shinobis? It was then that she saw the boy sitting next to the angelic maiden, and her heart skipped a beat in spite of herself. If the black-haired youth from earlier, the one called Uchiha Sasuke, had been handsome, but this boy seemed for all intent and purpose a gift from the shinobi god to women. While there is still a hint of childishness in his regal features and underlying youth in his perfectly chiseled countenance, Temari did not doubt that in a few years he would be the source of madness for every girl and woman for thousands of miles. It was all Temari could do not to blush. It was going to be a rather uncomfortable dinner. If her premonition did not fail her, then all of a sudden she gritted her teeth in determination. Chances like this comes along once in a lifetime, and she'll be damned if she is going to allow this chance slip her by. Not for the first time, Temari cursed her own inabilities. So do you come here often? Inside she bowed with shame at such lame conversation attempts. Well, no, actually. Haku, having noticed the tall tale size of attraction, answered cautiously. It wasn't that she is jealous of the amount of attention Naruto has gotten, but no way in hell is she going to share Naruto with some perfectly random stranger. She knew, of course, that to melt the ice which encased Naruto's heart is an effort that will take more than her alone, but as far as she was concerned, Naruto deserved only the very best. This is the first time for us in The sentence was pronounced with a very clear emphasis. Tamari noted with interest. Also, was it her imagination, or did the waitress too suddenly develop the air of hostility? So what do you two do? In Konoha? Not to be deterred, Tamari continued her crusade. She is not going down without a fight. Mark her words. I'm a chunin. And Haku made a rather wild gesture, suddenly realizing that she had no idea what Naruto's actual position is. Oh, she is aware of the various assignments Naruto undertook for the Hokage, the most of recent of which is the security of Konoha premises during the Chunin exam, but as far as she could recall there hadn't been an actual title given to the stoic youth. She's going to have to talk to the Hokage about that. Haku made a mental note, not noticing that the kitchen had grew suspiciously silent as Ayame strained her ears to listen for just a bit more information regarding the blonde Adonis, a free agent. If a name must be attributed to my occupation, Naruto stated from his ramen, rescuing Haku from a rather awkward situation. He then nodded in greeting to Tamari, whose blush spread a little more. And may I inquire what is the nature of your visit to Kanagakuretsu? It's Tamari. Tamari introduced herself hastily, a rather far outcry from her usual self. It wasn't surprising that the blonde was able to deduce her alien origin from her clothing and speech. Most likely, I'm actually here for the Chunin exam. And as she said this, she could not but feel apprehension, especially due to the true nature of her visit. If the plan is carried out, then she may well be forced to come face to face with these two, an idea that she did not relish, especially when it concerned the comely blonde. Naruto smiled a smile that made both Tamari and Ayame feel just a little faint. Haku, on the other hand, seemed used to it. Then we shall see each other again in the exam, I think. Wait, I thought you were not a genin. Tamari raised an eyebrow from the blonde's own words. She had supposed that the youth had already surpassed that particular shinobi ranking. After all, a free agent is not so easily hired by any village, and those that were usually individuals of great capability, mercenaries of mercenaries. No, Naruto nodded in agreement. The girl has a sharp ear and a sharper mind, but I will be watching the exam nonetheless. Tamari-san, I am certain you will perform most admirably. Tamari beamed, then realizing the time, got up hastily. Oh dear, I am sorry, I didn't even realize what time it is. I'm afraid I must take my leave. It's Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto informed the girl with a bemused chuckle. Oh, then I'll see you later, Uzumaki-san, yelled Tamari as she vanished into the distant night. We should be taking our leave as well. Haku, after a moment and finishing the last of his ramen, Naruto turned to the girl besides him. It is getting rather late. Haku nodded and stood, followed suit by the blonde. Before they could leave, Ayame, who had remained silent all the while, spoke up nervously. You will come back again, won't you? Naruto paused for a moment, and the hint of a smile flickered across his features. Of course, Ayame-san, I look forward to my next visit. With that, he strolled away casually from the stand, leaving behind a very red waitress. Tenchi, the proud proprietor of the ramen stand, chuckled as he patted his daughter on the shoulder, jerking her from her fantasy world. All right, I am enough daydreaming. We still have to clean up. I wasn't daydreaming, Otosan, the brunette frowned as she began collecting the empty bowls left on the counter. I was just distracted, that's all. Well, get distracted on your time off then, the older man grumbled. Right now we have work to do. Don't forget that. Ayame could not help but smile in spite of herself. Her father may seem at times a little harsh, but she had learned to read between the lines, and if she knew her father, the man had basically gave her the go-ahead she needed to pursue the blonde. Hey, did you hear? Rock Lee asked excitedly, leaning against the trunk of a large oak tree for support as he fitted his leg bracers. Word is this year they are letting rookies participating in the Chunin exam. No way. Tenten laughed softly as she spun a single kunai deftly between her slender fingers. I think it may have to do with the Jonin rivalry. You know, they are not on the best terms with one another when it comes to their actual performance. I doubt that, Rock Lee replied, looking rather serious. For once, they say 3 of them will be trained by Kakashi himself. The Kakashi Niji, who had remained silent during his teammates' exchange, spoke up softly, his tone one of surprise and intrigue. Now that is interesting. There you go. Tenten shrugged at Lee's words, not seeming to care too much. You know how Guy is when you mention Kakashi to him. At the thought, both she and Niji shivered a little. That was a scene they did not need to see. Well, either way, the superior smirk of Niji's returned in full measure. So, what if those Gakis are trained by Kakashi? A great shinobi does not constitute a great teacher, nor does it make great students. It all has a very sad sound to it. The peaceful occasion is suddenly shattered when a booming voice announced his arrival. Greetings, my youthful students, I have wonderful news. Tenten and Niji exchanged a nervous look. After spending almost 2 years with the green spandex wearing man, they had rarely seen the self-proclaimed green beast of Konoha acting with such zeal before. In those instances when they had the Misfortune of witnessing such displays of extremes are usually accompanied by a long and painful session of mental and physical scarring. I have received word that Kakashi's team will be participating in the exam. Guy shouted at the top of his lungs despite the fact he stood about a feet from the trio. Two of them was wincing at the sound, while Lee hung to the man's every word. That is why I have devised a new training routing that will help your youthful flames burn even brighter. Lee looked truly exuberant as he leapt to his feet with a loud yash, while both Tenten and Niji repressed a silent groan of despair. Guy's training routings are difficult, more so than most Jonin teachers' preference, but his special training regiments are, to put it lightly, not for human involvement. How the man can stay on such routines and stay alive, let alone so damn energetic, is a mystery that will remain forever unsolved. Tenten wouldn't have been surprised if the outlandish man turned out to be from another planet. Actually, considering his rather unique features, Tenten would have thought the alien theory being the more likely one. However, alien or not, it did not change the fact that as of now Team Guy is about to receive what latter generations would cheerfully dub as the training regiment from Hell. Sandame Hokage frowned as he leafed through the reports that had flooded his office, his eyes dark and troubled, and his pipe ancient and worn laid to the side, abandoned for the moment. For the first time in many years the old man appeared deeply concerned, even grave, about some occurrences that had drew his attention. It wasn't the news that his former student, one Orochimaru, was again on the rise, that troubled the old man. He knew Orochimaru better than even the snake knew himself. He knew of the hunger that fueled the fallen Sanin's aspiration, and knew the weakness that would be his demise. Know what bothered Sarutobi is the unknown, the strange, almost supernatural events that had seemed to sprout without warning, as though from thin air. Reports came from his agents dispatched all over the world, most of them only recently written, and all of them the same foreboding tales that would have chilled a lesser man to the bone. Reports of monster attacks, demons that sprouted fire and thunder from their maws, otherworldly creatures that seemed to have appeared from nowhere and left nothing in their wake. Some of the survivors had called them demons, and these poor wretched souls had been at first met with nothing but scorn and jeers. Then an entire city fell to the mysterious creatures, wiped out from the face of the planet so utterly that it never seemed to have existed in the first place. It was then the panic spread, and although such frenzy has yet to reach the boundaries of Fire Country, it would only be a matter of time before news of this disaster reached gossipers' ears. And after the QB incident, the Hokage wasn't quite sure if the village of Hidden Leaf is ready for another demon invasion. At last he spoke to the thin air where he knew the ANBUs. Listen carefully for instructions. Find Uzumaki Naruto now. Naruto stood up, his face impassionate as he turned to face the arrival. One of the ANBUs, dressed in their familiar attire, sporting the mask of a foxhound. The black-clad youth raised a single eyebrow and made a gesture for the intruder to speak his piece. The ANBU swallowed nervously, an unusual action for one of the Black Ops, but Naruto's training ground tended to have that effect on most people, although strictly speaking it wasn't so much a training ground now that Naruto had finished his session. A barren wasteland seemed the more appropriate imagery. Uzumaki-sama, the ANBU began using the respectful suffix instead of the regular san. As far as he was concerned anyway, who could be capable of such power deserved his respect, especially since he allied himself with the Leaf. The Hokage wishes your presence at once. Understood. Naruto nodded and dismissed the ANBU. So the old man saw fit to call on his service. After all, he briefly wondered what dark events had changed the senior man's mind, but decided to allow the matter to drop. Politics is not his preference. There are others more equipped to deal with the complexities of human interactions. One would think his mission is simple enough as it is. 2 days later, Haku watched the group silently hidden amongst the exam proctors. This year's candidates look rather promising as far as she could tell. At the very least, most of them held their bladder when Marino announced his baleful presence to the group. Most, but not all, as she noted with disgust. Some of the participating genins she did recognize, like the raven-haired Uchiha, the Haruno, and the coward whose name she didn't bother commit to memory, although most of them, even those sporting leaf head protectors, remained stranger to her. Not too unexpected, since she had rarely interacted with genins in the first place. When the entire classroom fell silent, Marino began his rehearsed speech, informing the Chunin hopefuls of the rules of the test. Haku had to admit, watching the man scaring the living daylight out of the brats, that Marino was an actor born. If she hadn't known the interrogator personally, she would too have fell prey to his menacing front, and judging by the silent but amused chuckles coming from her fellow proctors, Haku could tell that they too were impressed. Begin with that. The silence of the room broke under the rustling of papers as genins busied themselves with the 10 questions presented, and having seen the difficulties of the questions for herself, Haku is reasonably certain that over 90% of applicants will fail miserably, unless of course they look underneath, which she noted with satisfaction. Several students have already done 15 minutes into the test. and all but very few, most of whom were perfectly generic characters that can be killed off. Without the slightest remorse on the author's part, had commenced the information gathering. Of course, being genins, much of their attempts are not without faults, but Haku and the rest of the proctors allowed several of such incidents slide. They are admirable for mere genins. Others, however, are more on the clumsy side, their endeavors full of mistakes and all too noticeable movements. Doubtlessly, as Haku watched a name being taken down on one of the examiner's clipboards, these individuals will not last long in the coming challenge's third row fourth seat. She heard someone mutter and knew it was the signal for the proctors to act. Sure enough, a fraction of a second later, the occupant of the said seat found a kunai pinning his paper to the desk with a thud, causing those near him to jump in surprise. "You're out, number 14 and number 22. You are also eliminated." The proctor spoke indifferently and scowled at the rest of the entrants, who, thoroughly cowed, hurried back to their own paper. Haku smirked. Mentally, say what they will, in the end the Chunin exam is but an extension of the elitism ideals upon which the villages are founded. The world exists only for the strong, and those three shinobis have failed to prove their strength. With a quick look over at the test table, she is not surprised to note that many of the unscrupulous activities have, if not ceased for the moment, grew all the more subtle. Good for them. Of course, subtle they might be, but certainly not enough to escape her eyes like tell veins around the Hyuga's eyes, or the spinning tomos that mark the Uchiha's oh so noble bloodline. As though anyone could miss that of all things. Well, she supposed that as the host of the current exam, some favoritism is perhaps in order. After all, it certain would not do for two of the most prestigious clan to fail in such disgraceful a fashion, now would it? With a soft chuckle, she moved on in search of other more susceptible targets. She took a mental note of the mirrors on the ceiling, but they were concealed just well enough to overlook such matters. In one of the middle rows, a rather feral boy scribbled furiously while his dog perched on his head and barked occasionally, its small furry head waving back and forth. Apparently such blatant scavenging is also considered acceptable. She also took notice of the pink-haired girl she had met back in Wave, Sakura Haruno. Of all the genins present, she seemed to truly know her stuff. Never once did Haku catch her cheating, whether that is because of her brilliance or her skill. Haku wasn't too sure and didn't care too much. It wasn't her place to question such matters. All she was paid to do was to weed out the failures. And speaking of failures, number 120, that's 5 strikes, she called out coldly, launching her Senbon needle at an almost blurring speed. The occasional sparring with Naruto had paid off, it would seem. Please exit with your team, god damn it. Number 120, who seemed to have a bit more spine than the others who had been failed, slammed his fist down hard on the table. "I don't believe this. Cheated 5 times. I'd like to see you prove it. There's no way you can watch all of us act." His adamant speech was hardly finished before Haku appeared before him holding a single needle against his throat. The needle is in any other circumstances not very threatening, but when it is hovering inches away from your laryngeal prominence, that tends to put things in a whole new perspective. That's how she smirked superiorly. Well, she wasn't mean by any definition of the word, but in these circumstances a little theatric seemed to be in order. "So off you go now." Sakura watched in amazement as Haku pinned the luckless boy to the wall. She supposed it stands to reason that Konoha would employ Haku's service, especially with the backing of Naruto, who had, according to Kakashi, the ears of Hokage. Not only is Haku a prodigy of their generation, but her bloodline made her a powerful shinobi and a valuable weapon of the leaf. Still, to think that they would be reconciled here of all places. Although Haku appeared to not have recognized the pink-haired girl, the Haruno could tell from the slight widening of her eyes as the proctor caught sight of her that Haku indeed held some recollection of their past encounter. A few feet away from the girl, Sasuke also noticed the former missing mien. Unlike his teammates, however, he did not seem pleased or surprised at the presence of the beautiful female, but rather narrowed his scarlet eyes into slits filled with suspicion and jealousy. "There are those who are stronger than me and yet younger than you." The survivor of the Uchiha massacre again recalled his teacher's words when they had first encountered Haku in the guise of the hunter Nin, and with those words the once quenched thirst of power resurfaced again with vengeance. How can some many clan-less commoners surpass the noble lineage of the Uchihas? They do not deserve such power. Without warning, his pencil snapped in half. "Marino Ibiki?" Kurenai questioned, uncertain as to why Kakashi had adopted such gloom prospect after hearing the man's name. "Surely one examiner is the same as another regardless of their positions in the Konohan ranks." "Kurenai, you're still a newbie to the Jonin elite, so there are no way you'd know." Asuma sighed, trying to repress the dull ache growing at the back of his head. He did not relish the all too possible future of his team's failure before they could even pass the first portion of the exam. But he's a pro. Alright, a pro Kurenai tilted her head slightly in puzzlement. Pro at what torture and investigation? Asuma Sarutobi sighed and breathed a lungful of cigarette smoke. While those won't endure any physical affliction, the psychological pressure alone is likely to crack quite a few number of them. Damn, why did it have to be him of all people? What? Kakashi raised an eyebrow critically. Would you rather have Anko as the first examiner? At least with Ibiki, they will still be in one piece. Okay, Asuma sweat dropped at the not-so-exaggerated possibilities. Good point. That man. Kakashi, after silence elapsed once more amongst the group, groaned and leaned back. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm actually experiencing boredom without those brats around. Yeah, it can do that to you once you got used to having them around. Asuma chuckled, marveling the changes that have come over his friend and associate. Well, more of the latter than the former, really. However, their peace proved to be short-lived as an ANBU dashed into the room. Ataki Yuhi Sarutobi, the cloaked figure, barked sharply, catching their attentions all at once. You are expected at the Hokage's office right now. Then, casting a withering glance at Kakashi, recalling his legendary exploits, added, do not be late, any of you. With that, the man disappeared in a puff of smoke and leaf in search of his next targets. The three Jonin exchanged confused glances, uncertain as to what had just transpired. For the Hokage to issue such a command, whatever it is, however, they are certain it must be of vital importance, and so without complaints they too performed the body flicker technique and vanished from the spot. Yes, even Kakashi, I have gathered all of you here today. The gray-haired Hokage spoke loudly, his voice grim and somber, because Konoha and even the very elemental nations are facing a threat of incomprehensible strength and fatality, a disaster, if you will, that may well exceed the Third Shinobi War. The whisperings in the crowd grew to thunderous volumes as they speak amongst one another, shocked by the sudden revelation. The Third Secret Ninja War was the most devastating event to have occurred in recent history of any village, eclipsing even the Kyuubi attack of 12 years ago. And yet, just when an uneasy peace has settled over the leaf after the demise of the great demon lord, the Hokage would have them believe that yet another potentially more deadly calamity lies just ahead. With all due respect, Hokage-sama, one of the nameless council members who too had been summoned, rose and bowed before continuing his diction. Are you quite certain it would not do to alarm our citizens, to say nothing of other villages, without incontrovertible support? The Hokage narrowed his eyes in anger. The very existence of Fire Country stands on the brink of destruction, and they have the nerve to question his words. Very well. Come in. Naruto, to the surprise of the occupants in the room, most of whom had never seen the blonde boy before, Naruto presented himself without words, appearing from thin air in a burst of bluish-green mana. You called Hokage-sama. Once the commotion settled, however, the same sneer returned to the council member's face and to the face of his comrades, many of whom had not so secretly questioned the Hokage's abilities. Hokage-sama, surely you would not have created such panic on the words of a mere child. The Hokage said nothing but nodded to Naruto. For the impassive youth to begin, the land of Butterfly is no more. At those chilling words, the room fell deadly silent. The land of Butterfly, through its histories, has often been considered by the inner circle of scholars, cartographers, and geologists as a misnomer of sorts, for unlike what its name may suggest, the country is not so much a continental landmass as a confederation of city-states located on an archipelago some 400 leagues from the mainland. Despite its size, however, the land does possess the qualities that would officially qualify as a legitimate state: independent sovereignty, a defined boundary, a rather meager population, and a functional central government, created as a coalition effort by the city-states themselves. Furthermore, according to an unnamed informant, while never acknowledged or recognized by the Five Nations, there even exists a shinobi village inside the cluster of islands, most of whose denizens are involved in the island's defenses rather than serving as pseudo-mercenaries to their country. Of course, even with such anomaly, the land of Butterfly could well be all but negligible, save for one redeeming feature that set it apart from other such infinitesimal kingdoms. For while minuscule in size, this island country boasts an impressively strong economy based on the exports of rare metals, food products, and tourism, and yet in less than 2 weeks' time the entire archipelago was burned to the ground. Upon his arrival, Naruto had found nothing but ashes, silent witness to a horrifying and tragic tale. Surely there must be some mistake, the council member who had opposed the Hokage shouted, losing his composure. If disaster indeed invaded that country, would they not have sent some messages or aid request to one of the villages? They might have. Naruto shrugged, but judging by the age of the ashes, the broadcasting towers are the first thing to be destroyed, effectively cutting off all communication to the outside. The harbors are annihilated shortly after, preventing any escape attempts. But another shinobi in his late 30s or early 40s spoke up hesitantly. If what you suggest is true, then are we not faced with a human invasion? Naruto shook his head. What kind of humans would strike there? Victim's bones clean of fleshy question sending a chill down the spines of those present. I will not accept this insanity without proof. Again the same council member who seemed to be eager for retirement declared vehemently he'd rather die than trust the words of some gaki whose hair is not yet grown fine. Naruto sighed and tossed to the table before him several photos containing grisly images that should have lain buried. Then reaching into his pocket he produced a slightly singed tape. I managed to procure this from one of the radio towers before the fires could damage it. I believe it contains one of the last transmissions made before his words fell silent as he placed the tape within the cassette player. The entire room listened with bated breath to the soft hissing sound of the cassette being played, and then without warning came the screams. Does anyone read me? I repeat, does anyone? Is anyone there? From the speakers came the panicked voice of some faceless individual. For the love of the God, please someone, anyone answer me. Help, do you read me? We need help ASAP. They took out 3 towers, now we need backup. There were some more shouts and the pounding of footsteps before the man continued breathlessly into the speaker. Does anyone read me? Hello, oh God, they are here. The words were followed by the sounds of explosions and then something heavy crashing into the ground. With a loud thunderous groan, the voice, now thoroughly hysteric, came again in one last desperate attempt to reach out for deliverance. It never came. Oh my God, what on earth is that? The trembling voice seemed to shake. Many gathered to the very depth of their souls. That can't be. What are those things? Oh God, it's coming this way. More crashing sound followed as though the man was trying to escape from the grasp of some phantom shade that the audiences to his last testament could not witness. Then came his final, almost defiant shout, the shout of one who had lost all hope. God save me. Though I walk through the valley of the shadows of death, I shall fear no evil. His dying screams were drowned out by a earth-shaking roar followed by still other shrieks in reply, and with that the tape came to an end. Enough, now is not the time to lament for these souls. The Hokage snapped, taking command of the situation after the macabre message seemed to have left everyone in the room in a daze. Whatever these abominations are that destroyed the land of the butterfly, they are coming this way. As Naruto had testified to me earlier, I do not know if we will survive this impending destruction, but unlike our fallen brethren, we will not be caught unawares. Taking a deep breath he continued, Kyoshi and Kurahiro, I want you 3 to each lead a team to patrol our surrounding. Report back directly to me if even a hair moved in an unnatural manner. With strength seeming far beyond his age, the Hokage barked out orders, the dying ember in his eyes igniting once more into a blazing inferno. Asuma, you are in charge of delegations. Send out messengers with copies of this tape to every village. Yes, even IWA. Old enmities must be forgotten if we are to endure this trial. Only united can we stand. Divided and we will fall to the burning shadows that have descended to consume us all. The Hokage quickly assigned roles and duties to all those present, and clan head and ordinary jonins alike bowed to his will. Now is the time when Konoha must rally around the fire shadow. Now is the time for the Leaf's trial by fire. My councilmen, I trust there is no objection if the power of ruling falls on me. Temporarily turning to the council members who had stayed silent, the Hokage questioned, though leaving no room in his words for arguments, and none did good. Now Naruto, you are the only one with understanding of what these creatures are capable of. I want you to form an elite team capable of dealing with the invasion should it reach our boundary. If such is the fate God has bestowed on us, then let us show him what tenacious bastards we can be. There was a collective high ringing throughout the room. Go Hokage-sama, one of the jonins called out. What of the Chunin exam? Should we inform the participants that it is being cancelled? The Hokage frowned a moment and shook his head. Carry on for now, but be ready to intercept the tournament at a moment's notice. It wouldn't do to create mindless panic. Yet understood. And with that the room once more fell into darkness. The land of butterflies, what once was a lush tropical paradise, now remained only ashes scattered by the ill winds from the far distant east, carrying with it the scent of burning and destruction. The fires that had consumed the island nation had been all but extinguished, save for a few flickering embers still clinging to life, feeding upon the fallen structures that once stood with pride upon the now silent streets, covered with marks of some titanic creatures that seemed to have hailed from the depth of hell itself. Bodies broken and twisted, some half-eaten and others striped clean, lay scattered in the streets. Clouds of flies and carrion birds circling close to the corpses, hungry scavengers searching for their feast. Amongst the heinous sight, a single wooden beam shifted, the earth beneath its immense weight crumbling and giving away, revealing a small leather-bound book, its coverings blackened by fire and much of the pages eaten away by the fire. Buried beneath the ashen wood, only a single line could be read from what is left of the page. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang but a whimper. I am the second chief examination officer, Mitarashi Anko. Time's a wasting people, let's go. Time skip. The art of calligraphy, an art passed down from the ancient days, was highly revered in the village of Konoha as it was in every other part of the world, for they say the inked characters revealed a man's inner soul, his triumphs and failures, his strength and weakness, his beauty and his demons. However, looking down upon his Handiwork Hayashi Hyuga could not but feel that perhaps, just perhaps, this age-old tradition might well be outdated or even obsolete. Maybe the elders were right. Maybe he really should have pursued a class in the practice. Hayashi, once more frowning over his masterpiece, wondered silently to himself. The thought was crushed before it could even take root. He, the great Hayashi Hyuga, leader of one of the most powerful and renowned clans in the world, did not need an instructor in so noble an art. Mastery almost necessary in one of his standing. After all, his writings aren't that bad. If one were to squint hard enough, it is possible to still make out the lavender-eyed man's original intention. Well, sort of. Perhaps it might have looked better sideways, the Hyuga thought as he shifted the delicate material upon the circular table, scrutinizing the after effects. Sadly enough, it did look better. Briefly, just briefly, the man's mind wandered back to the idea of a teacher before tossing the possibility into the recess of his brain. He would not lower himself to the point that he would need an outsider to confer upon him mastery that he should have inherited by blood, a cultivated art that any nobility worth his salt should accomplish with ease. Well, he supposed he must have been an exception to such a rule. Perhaps, Hayashi pondered as he fixed his crude forms with a baleful gaze. It was time to turn his mind onto other matters, and no longer dwell on such failures like the matter of the possible invasion. In the wake of the devastating news, the shock had died down somewhat, and Konoha had, at least for the moment, returned to a level of normalcy. Still, there is unease to the village, as most observers might notice. Not enough to cause alarm, but enough so that one could not help but feel something was amiss. An increased number of shinobis now patrolled the streets, mostly around the walls that fenced the not-so-hidden village. More chunins, and even jonins, are stationed near the gates as well, ready to deliver any and all news to the Hokage in a moment. Notice the most profound changes, however, are the jonins themselves, particularly the ones that have received the instructions first-handed. There is a strange unnatural rigidity to their movements and a noticeable increase in the weapons they carried. All in all, for the lack of a better word, shinobi population seemed jumpier than before, tensing at the slightest noise, eyes darting from shadow to shadow, as though seeking out some invisible foe. An air of tension permeated Konohagakure no Sato, perhaps visible even to those uninformed of the impending disaster that may or may not befall them. And while the village, under the guidance of the Hokage, is doing everything in its power to keep its citizens and its legacy safe from the all-too possible assault, Hayashi could not help but feel that despite their effort, they are in the end waiting like trapped prey, sitting alone in the forest and waiting for the hunter to appear, trapped like rats in a chia pet. He hated the feeling of powerlessness, and he's not the only one. Unfortunately, unlike a war against another hidden village, the shinobi forces of Konoha couldn't just launch a preemptive attack on their foe and hope for the best. After all, they are not certain who their foes even are, let alone what to expect. Still, the temporary committee consisted of the clan heads. The Hokage and Uzumaki Naruto had done everything in their power to ensure the survival of the people of the Dancing Flames. The rest, it would seem, is left to the gods above, who alone decides whether or not the village hidden in leaf would pass their trial. By ironically enough, fire Hayashi-sama, a voice soft and respectful, sounded outside the doorway, causing the man's body to straighten in alert, quickly crumbling up the badly written calligraphy characters. The head of the Hyuga clan cleared his throat before answering, hoping to rid of the guilt in his voice. Yes, a boy by the name of Uzumaki Naruto has requested an audience. The voice seemed uncertain, as though confused by the request. He claimed to have been invited by Yes. Hayashi confirmed, please show him, and he is an important guest to me and to the Hyuga clan. I expect him to be treated with the utmost respect. Hayashi heard the telltale explosion of smokes as the servant vanished from his doorway. That was close. If anyone had seen the end result of his work, he would have become the laughing stock of the village. He was a bit surprised, admittedly, that Naruto had found time in his busy schedule to pay him a visit. As far as he recalled, the boy was up to his neck in preparation for a possible invasion. At first, the clan heads had doubts about the boy's ability, not very surprising given his age. Hyuga had been one of them, though he did not voice his opinion as verbally as others did. If the Hokage placed that much trust in anyone, then that individual might well possess talents worth of consideration. Hayashi's instinct was not faulty. The boy was for all intent and purpose brilliant, not only in mind but in warfare as well. Unlike other children of his age, or for that matter a great deal of ninjas, Naruto's suggestions were not swayed by emotions, only by reason and logic. Everything to him came only as either advantages to be used or obstacles to be eliminated. Nothing else mattered but the end. As such, many of his strategies might have been considered cruel, even inhumane, sacrificing human lives in order to secure a specific location or to provide temporary distraction. But one cannot argue one thing: Those plans are damn effective, which is why after much debating amongst themselves the clan heads have agreed to utilize those proposals if things should come to their worst in a struggle such as this. Victory must come at any cost, or there might not be much left otherwise. Naruto-sama Hayashi nodded his head in greeting, using the respectful title that men of his stature employed when addressing an equal, displaying a level of recognition. To the opposite party, Hayashi-sama Naruto returned the greeting, also employing the formal suffix. Might I inquire the reason why you have requested my personal presence? Hayashi frowned. Naruto was direct, a little too direct perhaps. His entire painstakingly prepared salutation speech has just been thrown out of the window. Such a pity. It was a rather good speech too, even by his lofty standards. You are perceptive, Naruto-sama, he chuckled seconds later, having composed himself again. As for your inquiry, yes, I do indeed harbor my personal agenda for bringing you here. Rest assured I meant no harm for you, but merely for a chance to receive an honest answer to a simple question and perchance to make a humble requisition. Naruto frowned as he studied the man's stony features, searching for some subtle hints. When he found none, he returned his gaze to the man's eyes, meeting the harsh lavender with cold indigo. Speak. I shall consider my recourse, of course. Naruto-sama, the head of Hyuga, smiled softly, his muscles straining from disuse. Conceivably it might appear an unusual and pessimistic inquisition. However, I must know the answer. Pray inform me in all honesty, if there were to be an attack against Konoha's forces, what is the likelihood of our victory, nay survival? Naruto's eyes narrowed as he listened to the question. He had suspected such might have been the nature of his visit. In these dark times doubts can penetrate even the bravest of men's hearts and minds. I know not in truth, he at last spoke, his voice guarded and careful. The creatures seem to have traveled by diverging paths. After their departure from the island, several of the coastal villages met similar fates, though their destructions are not so thorough nor the invaders' number so great, judging by the markings. If such is true and the forces have indeed separated, then perhaps Leaf's survival might not yet be so dismal. And if your presumptions prove to be false, Hayashi pressed, the answer might well decide the fate of the Hyuga clan. Then there is a great possibility the village will not endure. If my suspicions are correct, Naruto replied, his brows knitted in deep thought. If these creatures' demons are indeed what he suspected them to be, then Konoha may well be facing a force beyond their comprehension. Even with the increase in his power, he could not have taken on an entire army of those monsters without his materia. Even with the aid of the Dark Kyuubi, he could not stem the tide of destruction if it should reach the land of fire. But why would those abominations appear in this world? It did not make sense. Could they have arrived the same way as he did? No, that seemed impossible. No spell could have produced so massive an effect, and even if it did, they seemed almost unnaturally aggressive. In this world, a monster, no matter how powerful, rarely if ever attacked human settlements. So what could possibly have accounted for the obliteration of an entire nation? You have an inkling of the identity of the attackers? Hayashi raised an eyebrow. Naruto never spoke of this before in the map room. It is but a guess. Naruto interrupted from his contemplations, answered, though still looking uneasy. First for the young swordsman. If your inkling is correct, Hayashi continued, not waiting for his answer to finish, and the village of Hidden Leaf indeed fall to this darkness, could you yourself survive? Naruto frowned at the probing. He wasn't sure where the pale-eyed Hyuga hoped to gain by this particular question. Surely the man was not kind enough to be concerned for someone he had barely known. Still, the man posed a point. Could he have survived if the leaf were to fall? The answer seemed definitive. With the power and regeneration of the Dark Kyuubi, Naruto could indeed cut a bloody swash through the tide if such became a necessity. I believe I am able. Then Hayashi spoke, his voice shook somewhat. Then might I ask one favor of you? Naruto understood suddenly. It only makes sense from what he has seen of the Hyuga files. You wish me to escort a member of the Hyuga clan? Hayashi shook his head and held out two fingers. To my daughters? Naruto nodded and thought understandable of a clan's head wanting the continuation of the clan even through such calamity. As long as even one member of the Hyuga clan survived, the bloodline would not die with them but would be passed on to the next generation and the ones that followed, as a phoenix rising from flame and rebirth. Who are they? Hayashi exhaled a breath. He did not know he was holding, so Naruto did not outright reject his plead. Perhaps the lineage of the Hyugas would not die with Konoha if Konoha indeed fell. Unlike certain other clan heads, Hayashi held no illusion to their success, nor did he underestimate the power of the youth. Before him, ordinary humans' chakra pathways are like mazes winding from a central source throughout the entire body. Naruto's, if words must be used to describe it, was like a burning sun. It was as though every inch of his body pulsed with pure undiluted chakra. It was almost like the boy had Chakra for blood. Hayashi did not know how close he came to the truth. One you have met, I believe. Hayashi at last answered. Her name is Hinata. Naruto inclined his head in confirmation. Yes, I met her near the borders of Fire Country. She is a rather timid individual, if I recall correctly. Hayashi smiled at the description. Better timid than spineless, he supposed. And the other, her name is Hanabi. Hayashi responded. She's a bit younger, though you could still notice their resemblance. You wish me to escort them to safety if the leaf should fall? Naruto raised an eyebrow, fixating the man with a hard stare. Before he could say anything else, Hayashi Hyuga did something that no one else in the world might have believed possible. He knelt before the blonde-haired youth, his forehead brushing against the coarse floor. I beg of you, Naruto-sama, I ask this not as the patron of this clan. Hayashi on bent knees beseeched the wordless swordsman. I ask this as a father. Perhaps Hayashi was a poor father figure, cold, dismissive and condescending, but he is a father nonetheless. As much as he wanted to love his daughters, his duty could not. He was the head of the Hyugas, and his decisions cannot be swayed by partiality. Each and every action he took reflected upon the Hyuga. Each and every movement he made came under scrutiny. He was the clan leader, and he was expected to make whatever sacrifices necessary for the prosperity of his clan. That perhaps was why Hayashi grew so cold over the years. Ever since the death of his brother, he was forced to witness the execution of his closet kin, knowing he could do nothing to prevent it. Knowing as the head of the clan, he must not do anything to prevent it. The event had changed him. He became detached and distant even to his own family, not because he did not love them, but rather on the contrast, he loved them too dearly. He could not allow himself to care for them. There might come a day when they too must be sacrificed for the greater good, and the tragedy would break him. He did not care because he hoped it would lessen the suffering. He was the head of the clan, and yet still he was but a puppet dancing to the will of the Hyuga Council. As he knelt, he remembered the parting words of his own brother. I am doing this not for you, brother. I am doing this because it is the only thing I could do out of my free will. You would be ashamed of me, brother. Hayashi smiled sadly as he remembered Hazashi's dying, wishing and treating the clan head with the provision of his only son. In the end, I cannot save him. Forgive my selfishness. Naruto closed his eyes as he considered the possibilities. It would not be too difficult for him. He supposed there will be a certain challenge, certainly, but then he wouldn't have wanted it any other way. If he could not protect Konohagakure, then he will do his utmost to ensure the survival of its legacies. It was the least he could do for the village. In the 2 years that he had spent here, Konoha had become a home away from home. Even the Kyuubi felt a familiarity from the place, though its exact nature is beyond both of their understanding. Very well. His reply was soft and distant. Naruto-sama, the blonde, looked up from his meditation at the panic-stricken ANBU that had charged in through the doorway. Were the creatures already spotted, or did some other nameless threat loom over Konoha? We have found bodies a few miles outside Konoha. By their attire, they seem to be grass neens, but according to record, Kusa's delegation already arrived, did they not? The youth questioned, placing a hand to his chin in deep thought. If that was the case, then it certainly brings up questions concerning the identity of these grass neens who seem to have replaced the dead. Or would this be a breach in our security? We believe it is the latter, sir, the ANBU answered respectfully, keeping his head bowed. In the day that followed the announcement, Uzumaki Naruto is no longer the nameless boy who had served the Hokage in secrecy, but the Fire Shadow's second in command. Indeed, in those short 48 hours the boy had earned the respect of all but very few individuals who has yet to set aside their prejudice for one reason or another. Of course, their opinion as a result no longer mattered. Their faces were stripped from their body. Naruto's eyes showed nothing as his mind raced through the possibilities. This new piece of information entailed intruders, most likely a trio, have infiltrated the Chunin exam with unknown motives. This does not bode well for the Leaf, who already has enough for her to deal with. He would need to find and strike down the trespasser before they could stir up trouble within. Do we have a likely suspect? At this time he turned to the ANBU, his face a porcelain mask of indifference. We do. The ANBU dipped his head again. It is very likely the work of S-ranked missing nin Orochimaru, a Jonin who had defected from the village decades ago. We believe he has returned in order to enact his vengeance against Konoha. Very well. Naruto nodded as he stood grabbing the black cloak that rested on the floor behind him. I shall handle this personally. Then return to your post at once. Hi. The ANBU vanished in the all too familiar smoke. Naruto stared out from the window of his compartment, his face impassive at the news. Orochimaru this might yet complicate the situation. Anko Madarashi sniffed the air and turned to her companion, a boy of 13 dressed in deep ebon robes. She pointed to a direction slightly west and spat in disgust. He's there, I can smell his sickly scent. She had been surprised at first when the youth arrived at the gates of Area 44 bearing the command seal of the Hokage and demanded for her assistance. She had been peeved by the announcement and Little curious as well, but such emotions were quickly discarded when she heard the news that her old sensei was alive and prowling around town. Nothing mattered now except for getting her hand on the bastard and make him regret ever being born. I see. Naruto looked over to the place Anko pointed with a thoughtful frown. He didn't know too much about this Orochimaru person except for his powers, which rivaled Akage's. Supposedly Orochimaru is the master of some forbidden jutsus of his own invention. Though Naruto did not think they would provide too much of a threat, still one should never let down one's guard against an unknown foe. Let us hurry then. No, Anko said coldly, cutting Naruto off. The blonde raised an eyebrow but did not say anything. This is my fight and my fight alone. Naruto cast the Jonin an appraising look and nodded in agreement. He had learned long ago that these shinobis operated on logics totally beyond his comprehension. Perhaps to the violet-haired woman her decision is not so suicidal. I understand. Orochimaru-san. His disguise laughed darkly as he watched the trembling prodigy with an appraising eye. Such skill for a genin. Sasuke-kun, you are nothing short of my expectation. Nothing short at all, Sasuke growled as he struggled to take control of his body. This man was powerful, too powerful. He was like nothing Sasuke had ever seen before, not even when Kakashi unveiled his own Sharingan. At the same time, there is something off about the man, something slippery, snake-like, something dangerous. Unfortunately, Orochimaru's words caused Sasuke to pause in his effort as he stared up at the standing Sound Nina's Sharingan blazing in an attempt to free himself from the nameless technique. You are a genin nonetheless. With that, the man placed his hands together into the horrors of the two genins. His neck grew and elongated into impossible length, diving right towards the defenseless Uchiha, his mouth open wide, revealing sharp fangs coated with an almost poison like gliss. In a farewell present, Sasuke-kun. Orochimaru laughed as he shot towards the air of the Sharingan legacy. Unfortunately for him, his master plan came to a screeching halt as a flash of silver streaked past him. Inches from his face, Muramasa embedded itself into the outreaching branch of one of the trees with a soft thud where it stood, quivering at the sheer force of the throw. What the Orochimaru exclaimed at the unexpected interruption. Turning, the fallen Sannin found himself staring face to face with his former student, who stared back at the surprised ninja with murder in her eyes. Orochimaru, Anko growled as she fell into an attack stance, all the while focused on the serpent-like shinobi. This place will be your grave. Before Orochimaru could respond to her statement, more likely than not in something sickeningly sardonic, Anko charged with a flick of her wrist. Several needle-like weapons slid between her fingers as she rushed towards her former sensei. Orochimaru chuckled softly as he dodged the blow with ease. Then, with lightning speed, he reached out and grabbed Anko's wrist. Using her momentum against her, he pulled her forward and slammed his right knee deep into her abdomen, causing the purple-haired Jonin to gasp in pain. Releasing his grip, Orochimaru watched in bemusement as his former student staggered backward before launching himself towards the defenseless proctor and knocked her flying with a powerful kick. Anko's body slammed into the tree branch a few feet away, cracking the wood behind her. She uttered a pained cough as her body made contact with the hard material, blood spurting from her mouth. Damn, she was still not strong enough. Picking herself up from the debris, Anko pulled out a kunai from her belt and rushed forward again. She dodged to the right just as Orochimaru's tongue shot forward and slammed deep into the ancient tree. It would seem the man still held a mastery over some of the most obscure and disturbing techniques. Anko's moment of respite was short-lived, as like a living serpent the tongue darted back towards her, and before she could react had wrapped itself around her kunai wrist. Kuso. Anko had barely time to manage that single word before she was flung backward by the twisted appendage, slamming yet again into the same tree. Even as she struggled to recompose herself, she was yet again immobilized and yet again slammed into the trees. When she at last did rose, it was with great difficulty, her body trembling with effort. Raising a hand weakly, she pointed it towards a smug-looking Orochimaru. She had but one shot and nothing more. Hidden shadow snake hand, screamed Anko with all her might as serpents shot from her sleeves and sank their poisonous fang deep into Orochimaru's flesh. The man's viper-like eyes widened somewhat as he beheld the technique, so she would resort even to this jutsu. How pathetic! Anko, taking advantage of Orochimaru's momentary distraction, dashed forward and slammed Orochimaru into the tree trunk behind him. With blurring movement, she grabbed one of his hands and with a kunai pinned both hands into the flesh of the ancient growth. Looks like I'm going to need your hand, Orochimaru. Hope you don't mind, she grinned sadistically as she performed a rapid series of movements before the final seal could be reached. However, Orochimaru flashed a dark smile and melted into mud. Damn, a mud clone! Anko cried in despair as she felt the built-up chakra slowly diminish, leaving her drained and exhausted from the Failed technique, damn I failed ku. Behind her Orochimaru taunted the weakened Jonin, his voice hauntingly cruel and sinister. Slowly he pulled out a kunai from his own holster and approached the fallen Kunoichi. I would so enjoy this reunion if it were some other time, my dear, but I am afraid I have business to attend to with Sasuke-kun and I really can't be interfered. A few branches away, Sasuke, still caught up in the paralyzing jutsu, struggled to regain control of his body with no avail. So I suppose this is where we part ways. Anko-chan, the serpent summoner, grinned as he brought the above Anko's head, allowing the cold steel to linger for a moment as he savored his victory. Pity. Anko stared up at the glint of death. So this is how it all ends, damn it, she wasn't ready to die like this. There is still so much to do. She still did not have her vengeance. She can't die like this. Goodbye. Before Orochimaru could commit the deed, however, bolts of white lightning shot down from the foliages, raining destruction upon the spot where the man once stood. Had he not leapt away a few seconds earlier, Orochimaru may well have been reduced to cinders beneath the devastating attack. Who's there? Orochimaru, panic setting in for the first time, demanded as his slit eyes darted back and forth around the dark forest, searching for the still unrevealed assailant. He had not even detected the intruder's presence. In that technique it seemed like a lightning jutsu, but it is much too powerful. Your demise. A shadow shifted and a figure appeared next to the embedded Nodachi that had arrived from nowhere. Orochimaru had thought the sword to be belonging to Anko, but it seems he is quite mistaken in the matter. Orochimaru's eyes narrowed as he surveyed this new foe. He had never seen someone of his appearance before. Did his spies fail him yet again? This one would not be disposed of so easily, as he had with his student pulling his blade from the tree. Naruto watched Orochimaru impassively from beneath the fold of his hood. He could sense raw power within the man's body, power that nonetheless pales in comparison to his own, but still he remained the most powerful foe Naruto had yet to contend against, and the blonde did not entertain the notion of underestimating such an opponent. Still, it would only be common courtesy to allow such opponent to make the first move. Orochimaru frowned as he glanced at the clocked figure warily. The man did not take advantage of his temporary opening, but had allowed him to regain his bearing. It did not bode well. Orochimaru remembered times when he himself would perform similar deeds, allowing his own enemies to make whatever preparation necessary before crushing it all beneath his heels. It was like a cat toying with his prey before pouncing. However, if this lapdog of Konoha's, though he Orochimaru of the Densetsu no Sannin, is an easy prey, he must be mad. Kusanagi no Tsurugi, Ku no Tachi, his hand moving in blurring succession. Orochimaru summoned from his gizzards the fabled sword of legends, its blade glowing like the rays of a cold and empty moon. Grasping the hilt of the sword with both hands, Orochimaru leered back at his unmoved opponent. Shall we dance? He questioned with a predator grin. The first time their swords met, Orochimaru felt his bone groaning in protest and the ground beneath his feet splintering under the sheer force behind the blow. He half wondered as the stranger swung his blade yet again if perhaps Tsunade herself was under that cloak. Orochimaru cursed as he broke from the engagement, landing a few feet away. Blow for blow, he is of now match for the stranger, but perhaps his own arsenal of deadly jutsus would buy him victory. Without warning, the illuminating Kusanagi blade left his hands and shot towards Naruto with a life all on its own. Naruto watched as the sword reached within striking distance of his own Muramasa and swung the massive Nodachi with all his might. Steel grated against steel as a stream of silver collided with a ray of bluish-white, sending the Kusanagi spinning backwards, but it had done as it was supposed to do, a distraction. Hidden shadow, many snakes hand. Orochimaru cried out triumphantly as he pointed both hands toward Naruto's direction. Waves of ebon serpents raining from underneath the cloth and seemed to have buried Naruto beneath the throng of darkness. The attack did not last for long as a single voice penetrated the bondage. Fire, an explosion of flames surrounded the entrapped youth, burning away the offending reptilians like dried timber. Mere seconds later, all that remained of those vile creatures were but their ashes. Kuso, Orochimaru spat in anger as he watched his miserable failure, his technique thoroughly crushed by the nameless opponent. Just what kind of shinobi is he facing? The man could not help but question as the fires and smoke cleared. The hooded figure emerged from the ruin. Only in the struggle, the concealing hood had fallen, revealing his face to the world. Cold and emotionless, a boy. Impossible. Orochimaru's mind screamed at the sight. How could a mere child possess so monstrous a power? How could a mere child's strength exceed his own? This is madness. At the same time, his mind raced along a different parallel as well. If this boy could be converted to his cause, Konoha's fall would be only a matter of time. Better yet, if this boy could become his vessel, the power he could achieve would cause even Akatsuki to tremble in fear. And what better lure is there Then his cursed seal, no matter the boy's power, the corruption of his mind would inevitably take him over, and then he will follow Orochimaru to the end of earth for the promise of unattainable power. Orochimaru's faith in his seal is all but absolute, and that in the end spelled his doom. Unknowing of the consequences, Orochimaru prepared for the assault, but before he could complete the necessary seals, Naruto raised a palm towards the missing nin and spoke in a cold voice. Fire like the raging flames of some ancient dragon, white fires exploded from his fingertips and raged against Orochimaru, incinerating all that was caught in its path. The air seemed to burn beneath the sheer might of the spell, and the ancient tree branch where the two combatants stood cackled and burst into embers, a trail of destruction left by the unstoppable flight of the unearthly inferno. Orochimaru's face contorted with fear as he felt the scorching heat of the attack, and his fingers moving at blinding speed finished a desperate defense summon. Triple Rashomon and his command, 3 massive Kyoto gates rose from the ground, forming a nearly impenetrable barrier between Orochimaru and the incoming attack. The gates stood for but a moment, then exploded in a spectacular torrent of fire and smoke as they gave away, overwhelmed by the conflagration. The spell nonetheless brought the man enough time, having escaped from the fiery onslaught. Such power! Orochimaru exclaimed victoriously from atop a distant tree offshoot. Having finished the seals to his most vile of jutsus, you are truly the ultimate vessel. Allow me to give you a parting gift. Cursed seal of heaven. As the last syllable of the technique fell dead, Orochimaru's neck extended and shot towards a surprised Naruto and bit him deeply on the neck, drawing blood. The effect was instantaneous. All at once Orochimaru's neck retreated with a howl of agony. As it reverted to its natural length, Orochimaru's hands shot towards his face, peeling away at the falsely skin still attached. He clawed madly at his bleached skin, his body twisting and convulsing in torment, all the while his tortured screams rang high above the skies of the forest of death. My mouth, my face, he cried as his body continued to jerk. What it burns, it burns. Naruto frowned as he felt his flesh close around the wound. Was that all there was to the technique? How rather disappointing. Unbeknownst to the boy, what taint might have been introduced to his body by the cursed seal skill did not even last a second against the far more powerful taint of pure Mako. After all, how could the creation of men stand against the corruption of life itself? Summoning his sword to his side, Naruto appeared next to Orochimaru, still in the throe of unimaginable pain. Raising the blade high above him, Naruto addressed the fallen member of the Sannin. Without pity, your time is up, Orochimaru. Then all at once the sword fell. Naruto's eyes widened as pain laced through his body. His fingers shook and loosened the grip on his blade, which fell harmlessly to the earth inches before a trembling Orochimaru. It was as though his body was consumed by fire, a fire burning with such intensity that it overwhelmed the boy's senses. His world a swirling mixture of red and black haze. Though his face remained as impassive as ever, it was not difficult to make out the torturous light in his eyes or the strain near his jawline. As he kept himself from crying out with sudden weakness, Naruto fell to his knees, his hands digging into the mossy branch below him. His knuckles, wide white with pain, cracks and fissures appeared on the surface of the wood as the pressures of his hands increased, driven by the inhuman torment. His eyes were on fire. He could feel an all-consuming crimson creeping into his sockets, seemingly searing his eyeballs from the inside out. His skins blistered and peeled away from his body, leaving bloody raw patches of exposed flesh. It was as though he was the center of a torrent of pure power, a power that is burning him alive. It was all he could do to stifle his cries. Then all at once his world faded. Anko watched in alarm as the boy crumpled to the ground, seemingly unconscious. It was so sudden and unexpected. The youth had appeared from nowhere and massacred Orochimaru to the point that the man was suffering from his own technique. Then, just as he was about to deliver the killing blow that would end it all, this Uzumaki Naruto fell to his knees, his body overcame with waves of spasm. It didn't make any sense. If it was the cursed seal, it shouldn't have acted this way. The pain inflicted by the seal was instantaneous. There was no delay in its activation, a fact Anko knew all too well. Besides, judging by Orochimaru's reaction, the sealing had surely failed. But what could have accounted for the sudden affliction that had overcome the boy? She did not know at first. Then she sensed it, at first so faintly overshadowed by the forest's ancient scent. Slowly it grew, an unnatural chakra the purple-haired Jonin had never felt before. It was powerful, too powerful, and every passing second it intensified and expanded until the unearthly power encompassed the entire forest, charging the very cackling airs. It was huge, larger than any human could possibly attain. The only time Anko had recalled such sheer display of might was on the eve of the Kyuubi attack. Such abnormal chakra level could not have belonged to a mortal, and yet it was not the Kyuubi's chakra. The demonic chakra which the fox exuded was vile, disgusting, malicious and sickening, but this new chakra was different. It was confusing, almost paradoxical in nature, conflicting characteristics that seemed to meld together in perfect harmony. It was evil, incomprehensibly so. Whereas the Kyuubi's chakra felt abominable, this chakra felt pure evil. It was an evil beyond words, an evil that seemed to consume All caught in its pass, it is an evil far above the petty atrocities and cruelties of the human design. A malevolence that desired only destruction. It was a nefarious aura who craved only the obliteration of all things, to condemn all existence into the void. It was the deterioration of life itself. At the same time it felt pure and sacred, a soothing and calming feeling hidden beneath all the maleficent intent. It felt joyous, hopeful and light-hearted, a feeling of oneness with the world, in whose presence all the sadness and anger seemed insignificant, and in whose presence all the evils of the world was washed away. It was the life force at its pinnacle. Then slowly the chakra, holy and dark, sacred and evil, settled around the boy. Visible streams of bluish-green energy that pulsed with a life of its own. Then, with one final pulse, a ripple in the fabric of space and time that was felt by all the chakra exploded in a torrent of blinding light, a light that shone like the sun itself. Then it vanished. Gara's eyes widened as he felt the wave of chakra wash over him, enveloping his form in its illuminating embrace. It was a terrifying feeling, a feeling of such powerlessness and helplessness. For that moment Gara of the Sand felt like an insect, and understood how his victims must have felt in their last moments of life before crushed by his desert funeral. It was like staring into the face of the death god. In his mind the Shikaku howled, not with rage or malice as was usual of the tailed beast, but rather for the first time in his life. The one-tailed Biju howled with fear. Holy Kiba whispered as the light faded, his eyes still unable to adjust to the sudden deprivation of light. The chakra was enormous. Hell, even that word did the power no justice. He didn't know who or what was capable of such dominating force, and in retrospect he really didn't want to know. Indeed, Shino confirmed, he himself shaking, although thanks to his jacket none of his teammates was able to see. Hinata said nothing, but simply looked out the window. There is something familiar about the chakra. If she could only put her fingers to it. Shikamaru watched the skies, his face a mixture of stunned disbelief and deep thought. Both Ino and Choji were also baptized by the all-encompassing light, and they too have felt its unstoppable strength. This is simply beyond troublesome. Niji's eyes opened wide as he watched the receding light. He must be dreaming. The sheer churka contained within that explosion of brilliance could have reduced the entire village to the ground. What the hell? It was literally as if for that single heartbeat Kanahagakure no Sato gave birth to a second son with all its destructive potentials. Tenten gaped at the scene, unable to speak. Her senses were much duller than Niji's, but even she felt the incredible aura. She could not help but feel as though something far beyond her comprehension has just taken place. Rock Lee, the only one unable to sense the chakra, yelled afar at his teammate something about unable to see in the river, and needing his spandex. Needless to say, he was promptly ignored. Kintsuchi watched from the tree branches down at the carnage below. Orochimaru, it seems, have fled during the momentary distraction, and theoretically it was now time for the three sound Nins to carry out the plan. It was no surprise none of them was eager, for totally different reasons. Should we? Are you out of your effing mind? Zaku Abomi stared at his teammate incredulously, as though the rather pretty girl had suddenly sprouted an extra head. Did you not see Orochimaru? Orochimaru of all people getting his ass handed to him, and you want us to go down there while that monster is still around? I agree. Keep your mouth shut, woman. Dosa Kinyuta growled from where he is perched. The headache from the blinding light still refused to go away. We are not suicidal, even if you are. Yeah, let's just get out of here, agreed Zaka shakily. He did not relish having to confront someone of that caliber, and the light that followed was simply surreal. I think I wetted my pants. Thanks for sharing. Voices drifting in and out of his dream realms, ethereal and echoing across the empty chambers of his mind. Voices haunting and ghostly wisps of silvery light. He could not clutch. Voices screaming, pleading, peaceful, accepting, despairing. They are coming quickly. Go act. No, stay away. Please save me. Somebody help. It hurts. Help me please. I am sorry. Forgive me. I have failed. Don't weep, my son. I'm going to a better place. Do you think we will meet in the next life? Is there even a next life? Then there are other voices sounding downright moronic. Pull the pin and count to what. I'll hold it and you light the fuse. What does this button do? It's fireproof. Which wire am I cutting again? Wonder where the mother bear is. Then from the realm of darkness a single voice penetrated the veil of dancing shadows. A voice powerful and near emotionless, a voice ancient and dignified, the rumbling voice of thunder and lightning. It is time to wake. Uzumaki Naruto. The dark voice of the Kyuubi growled softly as the form of the fiery fox appeared out of nowhere. Your task remains undone. What happened? Naruto questioned the familiar black cloak materializing over his nude form. What is this place? What are those voices? The Kyuubi seemed thoughtful as he processed the question and turned to watch the floating silver threads. These are memories from the life stream, the final moments of souls before they too became part of the river of life. He turned to face Naruto again, his massive head inches from the boy's face. We are in The recess of your mind where your consciousness have retreated. What happened? Naruto demanded again, his voice resuming the cool air it once held. Something was different now, he could feel it. Do you want the good news or the bad news? The QB questioned with the hint of a smile revealing a great many teeth in the process. It would seem Naruto was not the only one to have regained his true nature. The bad news first, if you please. Naruto replied offhandedly. The man called Orochimaru has fled during your disabled moments. One would assume. The fox growled a little, showing even more fangs, some of them the size of swords. Still, the Mako infection he has sustained will halt his endeavor for some time. And the good news? Naruto folded his hands across his chest, waiting for a response. Surely you have sensed it too, the rift in space and the outpouring of power. Seeing the nod, the QB continued. It would seem Orochimaru's final attack provided the catalyst necessary to re-establish the communication between your materias and the seeping extension of life stream. You don't mean? Naruto's eyes widened in surprise. Surely what QB was suggesting is impossibility, correct? QB chuckled, causing the darkness to tremble at his strength. You have regained the use of the materias. Naruto could not help but smile. Look out, world, guess who's back?